Council will start with disclosures of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. I see there's none. Moving on to approval of council minutes, and we'll talk about the minutes of the council meeting held January 14th, 2020. Councillor Dunn, moved by Councillor Dunn, seconded by Councillor Thiessen. All in favor? And that's carried. And then there are the minutes of the special council, the special closed council meeting, and that one was held on January 23rd. Moved by Councillor Hammond and seconded by Councillor Thiessen. All in favor? Do you have, well, I was going to get to the questions at business arising out of the minutes if I can. All in favor? Business arising out of the minutes. Deputy Mayor?
We're the Mayor, thanks. There comes a time in your life when you always know where you are at a certain time in your life when things happen. On Thursday, January the 23rd at 3 o'clock, I was not at the council meeting. I had a life-altering, changing event, so I just want to put it in the minutes that I was absent from that special meeting.
And we'll do that. Okay, that's noted. Thank you. Reports of staff and delegations, and we'll start with the 2020 fees bylaw amendment for the Marina. Terry Simons.
Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. This report recommends an adjustment to the Marina fee schedule that allows boaters to moor for up to 3 hours at no cost. And seeking ways to assist with driving visitors into Leamington, the Marina is an important resource to the municipality, especially during the summer months. With consideration of this amendment, administration can use this as an avenue to promote Leamington as a destination. Administration can promote not only to stay overnight, but also allow someone that may not have thought to stop in for the day to do so. Currently, the Marina fees include transient mooring to stay for up to 3 hours at a cost of $21. The recommended change to these fees for the Marina will have minimal effect on the overall revenue, with potential to further promote Leamington as a destination. This change is consistent with administration's intent and current application of the fee in support of the tourism strategy to attract visitors to Leamington's waterfront as well as the uptown. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Terry. Council, are there comments or other questions? None? I would entertain a motion then. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you, Terry. Moving on then to the review of police services with MPM Consulting and Mr. Mike Mitchell.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to undertake this project. Is there any particular way you want me to proceed?
No, just as you see fit.
Okay. The project, if you've read my report, you would ascertain that in many respects it was frustrating, and I think maybe Council experienced that in November when the OPP made the presentation here. Right after that presentation to Council, I met with the 3 OPP representatives for about an hour, and I emphasized to them that my report, in my opinion, should be considered by them as an opportunity to explain what it was specifically that they were providing to this community with respect to service delivery. I didn't get any answers to any questions during the hour, so we agreed that I would email specific questions to them, and they would provide the response. Those questions and their responses are contained in Appendix 2 of my report. And again, quite a number of them were vague, are not really to the point that I was trying to find out. After reading that and going through the statistical information that had been provided by the OPP to the Leamington Police Services Board, it's apparent that Leamington receives an adequate level of police service from the OPP. The adequate level is defined in the Police Services Act and the regulations to the Act. The Act itself obligates municipalities to provide 5 core functions for policing: crime prevention, law enforcement, assistance to victims of crime, public order maintenance, and emergency response. Those services have to be provided, but the Act is silent on the extent to which they must be provided. The regulation on adequacy standards elaborates on those 5 core functions. It identifies a number of policies that all police services must have. It also identifies specific services that must be provided by the police service. But in fact, most of those can be provided by agreement with another police agency. For example, they have to have communications capability and dispatch, but they don't have to provide it themselves. What they have to do is provide 24/7 response to emergency calls, general and directed patrols, and at least one criminal investigator who can actually undertake patrol work as well. So the requirements in the adequacy standard are minimal. It's the minimal acceptable level of service. There's nothing of a quantitative or qualitative definition in either the Act or the adequacy regulation. So in my report, I identified the fact that some police services, and I believe the OPP is one of them, have a policy of differential response. So if you have an occurrence, for example, a break and enter at your house, a lot of the smaller municipal forces that I've worked with will send an officer or officers to investigate the break and enter. If it appears there might be some evidence, they would undertake procedures such as fingerprinting and try to track down an offender. Police services with a policy of differential response may just take a report over the telephone or an electronic report, assuming that the break and enter is not in progress. So, to my mind, to the community, and particularly to the victim of the break and enter, those are 2 dramatically different methods of responding to an occurrence, but under the standards, they're both adequate. So there's a big difference in the manner in which police service can be delivered. The OPP contract for policing exists now. It commits the OPP to provide the adequate level of policing, and I believe they're doing that. So again, keeping in mind that's a minimum level. There's no other commitment in that document with respect to providing any specific services, any quantity, any quality of service, or any specific staffing level. In fact, it prohibits the mediation or arbitration of any dispute on policing matters. The current and, in fact, the former contract are based on what they refer to as the billing model. And I think this was explained by the OPP representatives that were here. And when you look at the model and when you look at the contract, it's obvious that they're focused extensively on the funding formula and really provide no specifics with respect to staffing or level of service. I included as Appendix 1 for your interest, certainly I found it interesting, the original OPP contract for policing in Leamington that was provided in 2010. It had a section on level of service and a specific commitment. Now, to my mind, it's not particularly oriented towards actual service level, but it does provide a specific level of staffing, and that is 38.94 uniform positions, the .94 being part of an inspector and part of a staff superintendent position, the other ones being full-time equivalents that Leamington would be expected to pay for, as well as 10 civilian staff for a hypothetical, well, not a hypothetical, for a complement of 48.94. So the council in Leamington made the decision on the assumption that this would be the staffing level that would be provided, and knowing what they did, obviously, with the existing Leamington police force, they would have had a pretty clear idea of how close this would come to staffing this detachment to the level that it could provide the same level of service as the Leamington police had. This changed with the second contract that was based on the billing model and provided nothing with respect to staffing or level of service. The only thing that council or the police services board can do with respect to the level of service is to add enhancements, which means that you have to pay additional fees to get additional uniformed or civilian staff primarily focused on providing service to Leamington. Between the billing model and their integrated officer deployment policy, there's no particular way of determining what level of service indicators could be identified for this community. In the past, the OPP used to have standalone detachments where the officers in that detachment were dedicated solely to policing that community. Those two policies have put the standalone detachment into the dustbin of history, I suppose. I think there's one left, but there used to be quite a few of them. Now they're not. So it's very difficult not knowing how many staff are working in your community to figure out what level of service you're getting. I took a look at the workload in the community based on the statistics. So there are an average of about 20 calls for service in a day, and less than one of those would be a violent occurrence. As well, the motor vehicle collision, the number of reportable motor vehicle collisions again works out to slightly less than one per day. Most of the workload, certainly the criminal workload, is minor in nature. So I took a look at the workload and what you're paying. The budget for 2020 is $5.4 million. Orangeville is recently received a costing proposal from the OPP. The first part of that costing proposal provides them with a 3-year interim contract, after which they'll fall into the building model contract. That 3-year contract is very similar in format and in calculation to the original Leamington policing model. So I took a look at that, and what it works out to is for every staff member identified in that 3-year interim contract, they're going to pay approximately $160,000 a year. Applying that $160,000 to your $5.4 million would mean that you're paying for the equivalent of about 35 staff members. With my experience with smaller police services, the 35 staff members could be broken down administratively so that 11 would be supervisory, specialized police, and civilian support, which would leave you with 24 for normal platoon activities. That would mean that you'd have a sergeant and 5 constables on every platoon. That should provide you with sufficient staffing at the platoon level to provide at least 3 on duty at all time in every platoon, more likely 4. Most municipal police services maintain a minimum staffing level. And sometimes it's through the contract with the association, sometimes it's police service board policy, and sometimes it's police policy. But they have a minimum staffing level, and it seems to be a favored type of policy with the public. The daily workload would be split, those 20 calls for service would be split between a minimum of 6 officers doing 12-hour shifts. In my opinion, that's not a particularly onerous workload. The problem that I ran into with respect to defining the level of service is the criteria that you would normally use for a police service are not applicable to the OPP. For example, a number of years ago, the Ontario Civilian Police Commission identified 50 criminal code cases per officer as an acceptable workload. There is no number of officers here, so you know how many criminal cases there are, but there's no way of knowing what that ratio would be. Similarly, you can't look at the number of officers per population. There are other factors. Response time is normally an important consideration for emergency services, whether it's fire, ambulance, or police. And certainly from a public perspective, if it's an emergency call, a priority 1 call, you want to know that whatever agency you need is going to get there promptly. As well, for a police manager or a manager in any emergency service, if your average response times are going up, there's only 2 reasons for that. One is you have insufficient staff to respond to the workload, or the staff that you do have are not being deployed properly or not being deployed efficiently. So it's a great measure to determine how well you're doing and whether it's changing over time. The OPP do not maintain response time. The Crime Severity Index is a measure that the Statistics Canada created, I think, in 2006. And traditionally, you could look at a crime rate in a community and try to compare them. The problem being that under the traditional Statistics Canada methodology, a shoplifting offense counts for 1 occurrence as does a homicide. So a large number of minor offenses could skew the public perception of the safety in their community and make it very difficult to compare communities just on the actual numbers, and also within the community itself. So the Crime Severity Index is based on the actual severity of individual occurrences under the criminal code, and not just based on the penalty identified in the criminal code, but in fact on the penalties assigned by the courts for those offenses. So it's a great measure to see how you're doing with respect to controlling crime in your community. Again, the OPP don't maintain any statistics like that for Leamington. It seems to me, from what I've seen here in council with the OPP, how they responded to my questions, what I saw in the documentation I read, that they have an inability or an unwillingness to customize service to the priorities of their clients. And the situation is likely to get worse because with the new legislation, there will no longer be a contract, as minimal as it may be, and there will no longer be a police services board in Leamington. You might, or probably, will be part of a larger detachment board that will include representation from all of the municipalities policed by the Essex detachment. So without wanting to go through the report page by page, that provides, I think, a brief summary of what was included in it.
That's perfect, Mr. Mitchell. We are a council that everyone reads their agendas ahead of time. I'm quite proud of the fact that we all do that and we come prepared to meetings. So I will open the floor if there are comments or if there are questions. Oh, I want to preface this by saying when I speak tonight, I'm speaking as the mayor, not as the chair of the Police Services Board. For anyone out there watching, I am the mayor, M-A-Y-O-R. Thank you. We'll start with you, Councillor Jacobs.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. With staffing levels, we're comparing with the OPP, what they supposedly are providing, and the discrepancies between what we feel should be here and what is not here. Is there any information as to when we were a municipal force prior to the OPP, what the numbers were as far as staffing? Did we get down to 2 officers, 3 officers? Was there a minimum of whatever at that particular point in time? I guess what I'm looking at is there a comparator from what we had to what is being provided currently?
No, because what you had, and I did not look at the Leamington Police Service, I just looked at what the OPP offered Leamington in order to provide contract policing. And even with the 38 uniform members, they did not in their contract provide a commitment to a minimum level of staffing. And as I said earlier, most municipal services that I've worked with have a policy of providing a minimum number. Even very small police services will have a minimum of 2 on at all times. And so what I did when I brought out that hypothetical organization based on the $5.4 million budget is to try to give you an idea of what that would look like. And at the amount of money you're paying now, in my opinion, you could be having, or you could certainly afford a minimum of at least 3 officers on duty at all times. But I did not compare that with the Leamington Police Service.
And going back to your response as far as average response times, I mean, we all know things get busy. You know, you could do nothing one night, the next night you're overwhelmed. Are you basing this like on a 90th percentile? Like, what do you?
Different police organizations have different ways of measuring it. Normally, what they do is have a priority list. So they'll have 4, 5, or 6 different levels of priority. Usually, number 1 is the highest priority, and that's the most important one. And they will normally maintain records such that in 90 or 95% of priority 1 calls, we were there in under 4 minutes, something like that. And then you can compare that from year to year and just see if your response time is getting better or worse. So priority 1 would be your highest priority. Then, you know, if there were no priority 1 calls, you'd look at your priority 2 calls as the most important, all the way down to the ones at the lowest level. In some municipal services that are exceedingly busy, if a call has been, a low priority call has been queued for a certain amount of time, say 4 or 5 hours, it's dropped off and they won't respond to it. And for differential response, then there are certain calls that they don't normally go to. And as I used break and enter, which is a very common occurrence in many communities, is one of these types.
I have the Deputy Mayor next.
Worthy Mayor, through you, if you thought this was a frustrating document to prepare, it was more of a frustrating document to read. I totally read it twice. It's just, I'm not getting nothing out of this document right now. So that's how I feel. I'm sorry.
Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to echo Deputy Mayor Verbeek's comments. And I get that you must be as frustrated as we are not getting information out of the OPP. And that is our frustration, is that we don't get the answers that we're looking for. We're not getting we don't believe we're getting the amount of policing that we're supposed to get. And unless they answer the questions, how do we know? If there's the differential level of policing, if they run out of work, then patrol the streets where the crime is happening. We all know through social media that cars are broken into on a nightly basis. And I shouldn't say broke into, a lot of them are left open, and guys are going around long jiggling the handles, the door handles, and getting in. It's happened to us a couple times out in the country as well. So it's not just that we're asking them to police and investigate. A police presence sometimes is enough of a deterrent to get rid of some of these problems. The other frustration is that we have asked to have additional officers assigned to the area, and we're told, no, you can't have that. We've asked how many officers are on duty at any one time. We hear it's been as low as 1 or 2, but nobody can confirm that. I've attended a couple of police services board meetings, and all we ever hear is, we ask the question, and all we ever hear is, well, we can't answer that. It's a privacy issue. It's under investigation. They can never give the answers that we're looking for, and that's our frustration. So, go back to the report. Because you couldn't get any information, we're not getting any information. So where do we go from here? Will the next report spell out exactly what level of service we need?
In my opinion, you're going to get nothing more definitive from the OPP. And as I said in my opening comments, I sat through their presentation to you on November 26th, and I was disappointed and kind of surprised that they did not respond directly to the questions, legitimate questions that were put forward by council members, including one council member said, you know, we're the customer or the client. Like, normally, you know, you're a little more responsive when you're providing a service to your client. And so when I met with them, I emphasized that this report that I was preparing was their opportunity to explain through me to council what it was council was going to get for their $5.4 million. And really, there was nothing that came out of that any more significantly than what council had extracted during the meeting, because they just don't seem to either be willing to or be able to define with any precision what it is you're going to get for your $5.4 million. And they seem defensive. I mean, I asked questions about the police building, and to your point, they said for security reasons they couldn't tell me anything. And ironically, that's not an OPP building, that's a Leamington building. So that was my level of frustration, and I don't believe there's any way for the OPP, through the OPP, to find out anything of significance with respect to the level of service being provided now. What council may want to do is try to determine the level of service that the community wants, because judging by some of the comments, they aren't getting what they want, either with respect to service delivery or public safety or a sense of security.
Councillor Wilkinson, I have you next.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Mitchell, for coming tonight. I too have been doing this job now for 5 years, and there's reports that you look very much forward to over time, you get excited about, and this was one of them. This is one of the hottest topics we had going into an election last year. It was one of the top concerns of our community was public safety. It's, as you had knocked on doors, it was time and time again, people want that sense of security back in their little hometown again. Mm-hmm. And not often did I hear people talk about the cost of it, though. It's that didn't seem to be an issue for them, which I took notice of. They just want that sense of security back. After reading this report here, I wrote out a list of unknowns and kind of a list of knowns. And my top 3 or 4 had me just shaking my head. It's the same questions I had prior to this. You know, the first one is that level of service. Second one is the staffing levels. third being the measurement to figure out what adequate and effective policing means when they talk about that. And the fourth one that really makes me shake my head is the response times. That is a pile of baloney. That is incredible. I don't know how many times I've heard Councillor Hammond talk about response times with the fire department, or you, Councillor Jacobs, ambulance, EMS. Give me a break. I've never seen a group so out of touch with it seems like the attitude too as well, the way they sit in front of us and have this condescending tone with us, like as if we are the ones out of touch, that we're asking them questions. It was me that said, we're the customer, you're the vendor. And it's baloney that you don't come to the table when you've been put on notice that our community is unsatisfied. And here's the evidence here. What a slap in the face from this bunch. Like I say, the word I come up with is out of touch, and that doesn't go back to our guys on the ground either. We got great officers out there that care very much about this community. Our men and women, you know, in the uniforms, we talk to them. They are great people. There are some local people there, and people who moved to this community. They feel like they're getting their names dragged through the dirt as well. They see that Leamington is unique. It needs to adjust. But for the people following at home, that's what we've been asking for out of this group. And we are unhappy with the leadership and their unwillingness to adjust with our needs. Like I said, we are the customer, they're the vendor. That's the way it goes in any business. You adjust or else we're going to make changes. What I'd like for you to touch on, though, you mentioned it as you introduced the report. You talked about the enhancements. You just hit on that a little bit. I think you need to explain the enhancements in this report, because we've asked for more feet on the ground, more patrols. But enhancements in here has got a little bit, it's a little misleading. When you pay for an enhancement there, it doesn't necessarily mean that. I'm hoping you'll kind of explain that a little better.
The way it was explained to me is the municipality can put together a business plan to get enhancements, an enhanced number of officers or even civilians. And they can be identified to perform specific functions in the community. For example, I think I used community services there. But I think it was explained at the November council meeting that you couldn't just hire 4 enhanced officers and add them to each platoon. Caledon is one of their larger contracts. They have a budget of a little over $12 million. And so they have a contract similar to yours. Well, similar to yours, it's identical except for the numbers, based on the billing model. And they hired 27 enhancements. So they have 24 civilians and 23 additional officers that they pay for. That's 35% of their budget. So it's significant. The impression I got was they're not all that enthused about initiating the process to get enhancements. Ironically, if you took the staffing level that they identified in 2010 when Leamington entered into that contract, if you had those 48.93 staff at $160,000 each, your budget estimate would be over $7.5 million a year. So obviously, whatever you're paying for isn't the same number of staff years as you paid originally. And the enhancements will continue even when the new legislation comes in, according to the OPP. But I don't know how council feels about it. I didn't get the impression they were all that favorable to moving forward on enhancements. It has to be approved at the region and I think at the general headquarters as well.
We did ask the inspector a number of years ago under the former mayor. We wanted to pay for two more, 4 boots on the ground, 2 pairs, and we were turned down. And we offered to pay. And I think the gentleman from Aurelia or wherever the home base is, he more or less said, if you want enhanced, you will get what those enhanced services are, but they won't be more boots on the ground. And we're looking for more bodies and boots on the ground, and we were basically told no.
Yeah, again, they specified to me that it was for a certain limited number of specific activities, and it was not to enhance the complement to provide more general duties in your municipality, but there is no complement anyway. You know, so it's like trying to corral smoke. I mean, how can you add to a complement that they don't acknowledge is there? And that's why a lot of the typical ratios that I would have used in a study that don't apply, because they're based on your staff strength. And there is no staff strength. There's no minimum staffing. There's no staff strength. There's no obligation under the adequacy standards of the Act for anybody to be on duty in Leamington. All they have to be is available to respond. That's why I emphasize the adequacy standards are very minimal standards. There's only a few things there, and that's what they're providing. That's what they're obligated to provide under the contract. They may be providing more than that, but they're not telling us.
Councillor Hammond, I have you next.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Mitchell, I think that what your report and your summary of your report has only gone to show what we've believed for quite some time now. I think Councillor Wilkinson's frustrations are shared by all of us. Tonight, we have in the audience 2 other members of our Police Services Board. The Mayor and I sit on that board as well. And we've asked these questions time and time again without any answers. With respect to enhancements, they may be willing to offer enhancements at some level, or if we pay for them, but there's no guarantee they're going to be boots on the ground. They'll say that we might be able to do that, but they may get called out of town as well. You also talked about finding them not very cooperative, and that's what we have found on the Police Services Board as well. Their fallback position is always, it's a confidentiality issue, and that's what we find continually. We are now at the point that we need to do something. And I guess, and we're going to talk about this at length tonight, both the report but to my question is, how do we move forward from here? Where do we go? What's our next step? Because as we've talked about it quite some time ago, we don't want to make any mistakes along the way. We want to ensure that our residents are well covered by policing and everything else. Costing, of course, is an issue. To what degree, I'm not sure. It may cost us more for getting an outside agency in here to provide policing for our residents, and maybe their residents don't really mind that if they're getting some adequate policing. So I thank you for the report, and again, I've read it through a number of times, and it's only served to prove exactly what we already all know, and that is we're not going to get any cooperation, and nothing is going to change under the current OPP contract that we have in place. So I would like all my fellow councillors to think about that. What's our next step? Where do we go from here?
Councillor Dunn.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Mitchell, with all the reports you've done on different police departments, have you ever come into this situation where you didn't get that the information or found that it was so hard to extract the information you need to provide a decent report? Never.
I was going to comment just with respect to a comment I made earlier about the building. You know, I have worked in all sorts of police buildings all over. I have done projects for municipalities where I have visited municipal police forces around the province to use as comparator organizations, sometimes as many as 5. All of them I've gone into, had a complete tour of everything. I've never met a chief of police who felt having me take a look at their physical structure was a compromise to the security or safety or whatever. I've never had a client police services board not provide the information I want, but I've never had a comparator organization that I've approached not provide the information I want. So this is highly unusual. And as I said, some of the smaller police services maintain response time data. You know, they maintain a crime severity index number. I mean, they use them. Those are valuable management tools, not just for the Police Services Board and Council, but for the police administration.
And further, that for them to not say that they don't have that information or provide other roadblocks for you to get that information, they must be keeping some of those stats for themselves to be able to have some sort of clue of how to put things together to make it pay for the services there.
That might have been true at one time, but the billing under this contract, the billing model, has nothing about what exactly you're paying for. You're getting charged two fundamental rates: a base rate that every municipality pays for every property in the province policed by the OPP, and then this call for service per property cost as well. So you're not being charged for anything particularly specific, certainly nothing with respect to staffing.
Councillor Jacobs.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In your description of adequate police forcing and deployment of officers and so forth, am I off base in thinking that the OPP work on a seamless system, that their contingents of officers, regardless of where they are, will always back up another officer? And I guess I look at other services that adapt a seamless system. So to me, I like Leamington proper is a pretty busy, I guess we're the busiest in the county from our population and the services we have here, excuse me, that are provided. So if the officers are overwhelmed here, and they bring in officers from other areas, and then they take our officers in the opposite case to those areas. Like I guess I'm trying to figure out what the mythology is with the OPP's way of thinking. Like, are we just one big force and we just move it here and there and, you know, into the different directions where they're required at a specific point in time?
That's what they refer to as their integrated model of staff deployment. And they stress that as an advantage for municipalities. So any occurrence in Leamington can be responded to by any officer from the OPP Essex. And so it provides them with a great deal of flexibility with respect to deploying their staff resources. So, and you have to understand that in Essex County, they police 5 municipalities, but they also have highway and provincial responsibilities as well. So it's a more complex service delivery continuum than just a municipal force would have. So the advantage that they will say is that if the officers in Leamington got overwhelmed by an occurrence, they could bring people in from elsewhere in Essex or from other detachments. Similarly, they can take people out of Leamington, and consequently, they don't have a defined number of staff dedicated to anyone. So in their annual report, they identify how many staff they have in Essex County by rank. But they're divided between 5 municipalities and I don't know how many highways and waterways policing and provincial responsibilities. So you can't nail it down. But a normal municipal police service, Amherstburg's one that was similar size and it's local, they had a specific complement. Now, if outside Amherstburg in the OPP jurisdiction there was a serious accident and the OPP couldn't respond, Amherstburg would respond to that. This is quite true all around the province, and the OPP will come and assist municipal forces as well. But generally speaking, the municipalities provide all of the service they normally require with the existing staff level. The OPP, so you don't have this moving around outside of the OPP. It's a provincial deployed organization, and they have a series of policing responsibilities that are not shared with municipal forces, such as highways and waterways and that type of thing.
So how would you describe then the ancillary components of the OPP here? Like, okay, we have supposedly 9 officers on duty, or 5, whatever the number is. But what about the other services that are provided within the municipality that don't show up on our statistics and so forth? Like their drug teams, their, you know, these other things that are going on that aren't really rolled into the complement that we have. I guess where I'm going with this is that we're contracting for something on one side of the table, but we're receiving a little bit more on the other side of the table, you know, like with these different functions within their operation. Am I off base in that thinking?
Well, not off base, but if you take a look, and I put a specific question because I wanted to know what specialized services they had provided to this municipality, and it was one where they just gave me a list of all those specialized service units that they have. So traditionally, say on your original contract, you're going to get those 48 full-time equivalents, albeit some of them may leave Leamington from time to do other duties. And they have these specialized units. Well, they have helicopters and boats and highly specialized criminal investigative units and forensic specialists and things like that, which they would identify under that contract as being provided to you free of charge. But it's not free of charge. You're already paying through your provincial taxes. So whatever you got here, you know, you're under that contract, you're paying for something you kind of knew about, and then you were getting these additional specialized services, but you're paying for them anyway. And the OPP has an obligation under the Police Services Act to provide specialized services, and they provide it to everyone. I mean, when they had the papal visit in Toronto, there were all sorts of OPP in Toronto. When they had a threat to someone was going to blow up the subway system. Back when I started, the Shriners Parade, I think they brought in hundreds of OPP for that weekend or the long weekend to assist Metropolitan Toronto Police. So they help each other. At the same time, one of my friends was a detachment commander on Downsview, which is the 401 going through Toronto. Well, very often for a serious accident, Toronto police would get there quicker because they had more cars on the road. So it's a mutually beneficial thing that has gone on forever. But for the specialized units that you might be talking about, they have them, they're excellent, and they're paid for by the provincial taxpayer, which includes all of us.
I'm just going to take my turn now. There's still a few more people that would like to speak, but I just wanted to tell you, and my colleagues, I didn't get a chance to tell you about the coffee chat that I had this weekend at the library. We put out a call to our residents to come and sit and talk with the mayor, and there's usually a couple of council members there as well. On social media this past week, I certainly got the impression that people are very fed up with the petty crime and the drug issues that are going on in our community. So I reached out to our staff sergeant, and I said to him I thought that perhaps one of the members should attend, because not only should the issue be addressed by the police, but I'm also a little bit afraid of vigilante justice. And if people have that opportunity to voice their concerns and so on, there's usually a certain level of satisfaction. Well, now Staff Sergeant Johnson's a great fellow, but he told me right away that the public relations officer most likely would not be able to attend because it's her day off, and that was the case. I suggested that perhaps it would still be good if someone would attend, but he told me that these events can go to the left sometimes, and so they chose not to attend. I'm just putting that out there so you know. The common theme at the coffee chat was police services, dissatisfaction. So I want to tell you, different than what Councillor Verbicki said, but still the same. I'm glad your report was the way it was, because that's exactly how I have felt after every police service board meeting that I've gone to. what do those numbers mean? I will tell you that I'm not an accountant, but I will also tell you I'm not stupid. I can do basic math. The numbers mean nothing. They meant absolutely nothing. So to me, you validated what we've been saying all along. And when you think about it, when people don't give you numbers, there's a reason they're not giving you numbers, and that's because they do not want to be held accountable. Think about that. For $5.4 million, we are paying people who are not giving us their numbers. Let me ask you, if your insurance man comes and says, I want you to pay me $5,000 a year for insurance, I'm not going to tell you what you're getting for it. I want you to pay $5,000. Who of us in this room is going to sign up for that insurance? I would wager none of us. And we're doing the exact same thing. And I'm not being uncivil here. I'm being truthful. And whoever can't take this truth, I'm doubting them. I'm highly suspicious. This is what we've had at every police services board meeting. I did my homework before those meetings. I talked to our police officers on the ground. That's who told me that there were 1 and 2. I wasn't getting this from figures in the air. I talked to officers that I've known for many years and that I've trusted. They were officers that had roots in Leamington. They know our community. I said to them, tell me how many people worked on Monday. 2. I went to another one. Tell me how many worked last week. We had one day there was 1. I wasn't just pulling these numbers out of a hat. Obviously, I wasn't getting them from the 2 gentlemen in the chair, but I got them from the boots on the ground. So when you think about the numbers, the math, the basic math, 3 officers, really? Really? Is that good enough for a town of 32,000 people that swells by up to 10,000? Really? In my books, that's not enough. If you had kids in a classroom, we're talking about right now volumes of children and teachers. This is the same thing. 3 officers for that many? That's ridiculous. Response times as well. Councillor Jacobs knows, EMS, they report to County Council, as does the Deputy Mayor. We know what response times are for EMS. And yeah, there are times when they're overloaded, but they tell us. When they're in code red because they can't do anything because they're tied up at the hospitals, they tell us. And that's an issue they've tried to fix. These guys aren't even telling us. For heaven's sakes, we don't even know what kind of coverage we've got. Shame on them. Actually, shame on us for still taking it. We need to come to a decision here because this is ridiculous. Number of calls. We've asked, what does a call, what is a call? We had an instance where someone at a church called 911 because someone had passed out or fell or whatever. So they called police and ambulance. Police came in. Ambulance was already there. Police came in, the driveway turned around and drove away. Is that a call? Did we just get billed for that call? We have no idea. We don't know what we're paying for. Is that due diligence on our part? Is that being fiscally responsible? Can we answer to our taxpayers and say we're getting the best thing that we can? I'm going to say no. And last of all, not answering you was disrespectful. It was disrespectful to you, Mr. Mitchell. It was disrespectful to council. It was disrespectful to every taxpayer that's paying towards that $5.4 million. And to me, if I don't have the respect of the people that are working for me, I find somebody else to work for me. And that's what I would say we should do. I'm sick and tired of this level of service. I'm not making excuses for this agency anymore. I know, as you said, Councillor Wilkinson, it's not the boots on the ground, it's who they're working for. And if they can't do better, we set the tone. If we don't like the customer service level from our municipality, we as council are held responsible. Those top guys are the ones that are held responsible, not the other guys. We need to change it. It's up to us to change it. It may be $7 million. I talked to a lady tonight who is just an average person. She texted me and wanted to know what my thoughts were on the police level because she thought it was not adequate. And I said to her, this is going to cost money. This may be between $1 and $2 million more. And she said, if I feel safe, to me, that's worth it. This is a regular person, not anybody making 6 and 7 figures. This is just a regular person that said, that to me is worth it. We need to have that conversation. I would say that, and I'm just going to put this out there, that we should ask admin for a report on our options of where to go next. How do we go about putting out an RFP? What do we do next? How do we talk to the public? Do we not talk to the public? I think that's where we need to be. Once we make that decision, we have a year in which to change. I hate to put it off any longer because if we wait another year, we're at a year and a half. And then we've got another year and a half of poor service. We're already getting nothing for 5.4. If we have to pay more, at least we'll be getting something. Those are my comments. I will now ask Councillor I have Councillor Thiessen first.
Thank you, Mayor, and that's exactly where I was going to go, is what are our next steps? And how quickly can we ask administration to come back to us with a report of our next steps? We know that this report told us exactly what we already knew. We know that we're not getting the level of service that we are looking for. Let's move on. Where are we headed?
Mr. Neufeld.
Thank you, Mayor. It is obvious that Council is looking to determine what service levels are wanted by this community and by Council. Certainly, we know that the service levels that have been presented here tonight, if you can call them the service levels, are not acceptable to Council. I think we've heard that loud and clear. So I think part of what administration, it sounds like you'd like administration to provide some options. You will see that in Ms. Orton's report, part of her recommendation was to ask Mr. Mitchell to continue on with that second report. But it seems that perhaps administration needs some time to consider Council's suggestions here tonight. We can come back quickly with a report that will offer up a couple of options for Council to consider. As you had stated, Mayor, is it a matter of going out to the public to ask them what they are looking for? Is it a conversation just amongst Council? Perhaps it's in the inclusion of some of the other contracts within the area to see what service levels they have. So not to, and really not to hold it off, because you're right, time is of the essence for Council. But I would suggest that perhaps we, Council, receive this report and administration be directed to come back with just a list of options, which may include continuing on as has been, as is shown in the current recommendation, but at least to give Council maybe perhaps a few more options. Is that what Council is looking for?
Councillor Hammond.
Mayor, thank you. That's exactly what I had thought of. I think we should receive Mr. Mitchell's report with thank you, Mr. Mitchell, and I would like to make a motion to that effect, and also make a motion that we ask administration to bring back a report to us as soon as they can with respect to what we need to do moving forward.
Seconder on that, Councillor Dunn. Comments or questions? All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much for validating our thoughts. And, well, but you know what? We knew it, but sometimes you need an arm's length person with some background to validate what you're already thinking. We certainly aren't police consultants here at this table, but we know what we want, and we know what we want to pay for. And we just needed someone to tell us we really weren't getting what we thought we weren't getting. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. And I'm sorry that they were not more accommodating. and more hungry for the work, for the job. You know, that's how you can always tell. One time I hired a guy. I wanted to hire a guy. Actually, he's sitting down at the end of this table. I went to open my business. I needed a sign. I hadn't told anyone yet. He called me up and he said, "I hear you're opening a business. I want to quote you on a sign." I said, "I don't care what you want, what you're going to charge me. I'm going to hire you just because you came and said you wanted the job." When people are hungry for work, that's a good thing because they want to do well. And this to me shows they don't care.
I can say it was disappointing that they didn't appear to be interested in any level of flexibility with respect to the contract or the service they provided.
It's a sad commentary, and it's a sad legacy to leave as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Mitchell. So, we have an addendum, gentlemen, the economic adjustment, and who will be speaking to that? Mr. Neufeld.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I worked diligently or quickly to get this on as the addendum. As Council has approved the 2020 budget, I thought it was appropriate to try and get the economic adjustment as it affects staff and Police Services Board and all the others who are paid for their services through the municipality of Leamington. And just very briefly on the background, in 2013, Council adopted the Salary Administration Program through its consultants, McDowell and Associates. The system is designed to ensure pay equity, compliance, and the program established the process by which salaries for non-union employee groups are administered. In 2018, in January of 2018, the consultant had presented to Council for a new proposed salary grid, but at that time, Council felt that it was not an appropriate time to do that, and approved a 2% economic adjustment at that time, but had indicated that the proposed salary grid be brought back for consideration at a later date. And that was done in May of 2019, and Council approved the revised salary grid, including a 2% economic adjustment for 2019. Now, the salary grid, ensuring that the salary grid remains competitive within the market helps the municipality attract and retain talented human resources. And we know that as the baby boomers are retiring, that competition for scarce resources in the public sector, specifically within the municipality and in the local municipalities, has become much more competitive, especially because it's only about a half-an-hour drive to any of the other municipalities within the region. So, pursuant to the municipality's pay policy, the economic adjustments are considered annually by Council. The policy actually says that the CAO is to bring this report in December, but I've held off again simply because it's more appropriate to ensure that the budget has been passed by Council, which included the 2% economic adjustment. When we look at the amount that is recommended to Council for an economic adjustment, the policy indicates that we have to consider the Consumer Price Index for 2019, any negotiated settlements with the unionized employees, and the financial impact against budgetary constraints. And giving all of those things into consideration, a 2% economic adjustment is considered appropriate. This adjustment for full-time non-union staff includes Council, members of the Committee of Adjustment, the Leamington Police Services Board, Union Water Supply System, Joint Board of Management, Migrant Workers Community Program, because we added, that was a newly added one, and the CAO, part-time, seasonal contract, and student positions, and the financial impact is approximately $180,000, and again was included and approved within the 2020 budget. So the recommendation is looking for council to approve that 2% economic adjustment to all of those groups that I have just listed. And I'll take any questions if you have any.
Comments or questions? Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This isn't about the economic adjustment. This goes more towards attendance. So on some of these committees, these boards, if the members aren't there, they still get paid. Is that a discussion we should have, that you get paid for attendance on some of those boards?
You, Mayor McDonald. Yes, certainly, Councillor Thiessen, we can take a look at that. You will recall that staff brought a report back when the one-third tax exemption was in place, and we said that we would address that. So it is on the to-do list to look at options for how council is compensated for committee attendance, as well as which committees. So it is on the work plan for this year, and hopefully we'll get to it soon.
Anyone else? Moved by Councillor Jacobs, seconded by Councillor Dunn. All in favor? And that's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to other matters for approval. There are none. Consideration of bylaws, Ms. Percy.
Bylaw 0720 being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 5519, a bylaw to provide for a tariff of fees to be charged in 2020 by the municipality of Leamington, and that's with respect to the report that was earlier this evening with Marina Fees. Bylaw 0820, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its special meeting held February 5th, 2020. Bylaw 920, a bylaw to confirm council proceedings from its special meeting held February 5th and 6th, 2020. Bylaw 1020, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its special meeting held February 11th, 2020. Bylaw 11-20, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held February 11th, 2020. Bylaw 70-19, Jefferson Wiper Drain, bylaw to provide for the construction of a shared replacement bridge over the Jefferson Wiper Drain in municipality of Leamington. This is third reading. Bylaw 7119, Goral Drain, being a bylaw to provide for the construction of new drainage works on the Goral Drain. This is again also is a third reading only.
Motion moved by Councillor Dunn, seconded by Councillor Hammond. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Notices of motion, there are none. Open session. Deputy Mayor, we'll start with you.
We're the mayor, thanks. I know administration is kind of busy, but I just want to know, we've had an incident last couple of weeks. It's called a taxi bylaw. I was wondering when we might be able to see a revised issues that council can vote on it, so that the committee or the Court of Appeals has something to go by. Right now we're kind of out there making decisions based on an old one, which it doesn't make sense. So I just want to know if there's a timeline, or if we could have that. I can't believe I'm asking for the taxi bylaw before I had the OP, but whatever can be done.
Ms. Percy, can you answer that?
Last year, there was a number of questions that came to administration to be responded to with respect to the taxi bylaw. From that meeting, some of the bylaw was changed. For example, the vehicle limits were increased to 10 years, but there were some questions that administration was going to return with. A couple of them that I can think off the top of my head were brokers, meters versus flat rate, and a few other items. I have been working on the report. However, meters versus flat rate and leasing of plates is quite comprehensive, and I've done some interviews already with drivers and some owners, and I continue working on that. But I will bring back the report with a few of those other questions, and then a second report with the remaining.
Okay. I have Councillor Dunn next. Councillor Dunn.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I just want to take a moment to thank all of council for your help in the Giving Spoon and coming out and supporting that, as well as all the community and all the volunteers. It was a huge success. We raised a lot of money for the bridge, and it was up over last year. So I thank you all in the community for a huge outpouring of response and love towards the bridge. It worked out really excellently, so I want to thank you all very, very much.
Thank you for your hard work and for your good job at coordinating it and making it a success. That will be your legacy, Bill Dunn. When you're gone, they will still be talking about the Giving Spoon and the work that you did. And that's why you're here. You have a heart for the poor, the disadvantaged. You are an admirable fellow. Thank you. I have Councillor Wilkinson next.
This one's for Mr. Sharon. Just wondering if we've had any progress on lessening the amount of signs on Erie South, and if we can expect anything before our tourist season rolls around. Sorry for the short notice, buddy.
Was a coffee chat comment as well.
Through your worship. We did hire somebody to have a look at it, another review. The recommendation was all the signs are essentially mandatory without some change, some consideration to change. So we are going to have a look at it. I don't have an update for council. We're not necessarily pleased. Well, we're not pleased, with the aesthetics of all of those signs. One of the comments that I had post-project, to the designers at ACOM was, the next time you design something like this in a municipality, have regard for the mandatory signage and what that's going to look like from an aesthetics point of view. Because if we had built it slightly different, we wouldn't require all of the signs. But because we have all the multiple islands, and because of the locations of the intersection and the need to direct traffic directionally around those islands, those are the regulatory signs that are required. So the person we had to look at it basically said they're required based on the design. But we're not finished. We still plan on doing some things, and hopefully I can have an update for council. We'll look at it this spring, Councillor. I'm sorry, I don't have a great answer for it, but it's still on our desk.
Councillor Hammond, I have you now.
Thank you, Mayor. Brenda, maybe you could, I'm not on the Taxi Appeal Committee any longer, but during my time there, it seems like one of the biggest concerns is the number of parking spaces required. And I know you know that, among all the rest of them. So I'd like you to draw your attention to that and see if in your belief that we still need, for example, if they've got 6 cabs, do they really need 12 spots? That seems to be one of the biggest problems, and I don't know if that's where Deputy Mayor Verbeek was heading with the conversation or not. Other than that, if you will indulge me, I'd just like to send a shout out to my granddaughter, Lauren. It's her birthday.
Now, we believe you, but if the deputy mayor was saying it was her birthday, it would be highly suspicious. Because I have appreciated the 375 cakes I've received in the last 8 years. Oh, gosh. So with that, if there's no one else, statement of members non-debatable. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Wilkinson, Deputy Mayor, all in favor? Thank you and good night.